Hey everybody, what's going on? Chase here. Really excited about today's episode. Like I promised last time, I wanted to get into exactly what I've been coding in the Treehouse kind of projects that we've been working on, but in a slightly different way. This second project, as a new person coming into coding, really stretched me in a way that the first project didn't. And it's really shaping up that it looks like the third project is going to be doing something similar, which is really great. It shows a great cadence and a really great slope and scale when it comes to how they've really put these projects together, which is really kind of neat. Like I mentioned before, one of the really neat things about how they run things at Treehouse is they give you, call it 80, 85, 90%, whatever it would be, of what it's going to take for you to do the projects that they outlay for you. And in doing that, it creates this really unique environment where you can totally pass and totally get where you're trying to go with the projects that you're working on through them. But then they tack on these little extras. If you want to get, and exceeds expectations on your project, they tack on these, other things. Is that a lot of what they talk about, that comes along with this whole coding thing is Googling stuff, looking stuff up, going to Stack Flow, looking on GitHub, talking to other developers, talking to other people in the space about maybe a potential problem you're having or something you're trying to solve. So they kind of bake that in to what they're doing with these projects, where if you really want to go above and beyond what we've already taught you, and potentially where your skills currently lie, you're going to have to go outside of the program. And so I think a lot of people might view this as a negative. To me, it's a positive, because then it teaches you from the very jump that you need to get out of the environment that you're maybe in and get a little bit comfortable with being uncomfortable and looking for solutions in places that you might not know where they are going to be, and it causes you to search some things out. So what I want to do is I want to go through some of the code and exactly what this project produced, where they kind of started you, as well as where you hopefully finish up, and go through some of the code that I wrote to explain kind of what's going on within it. And really this is just for me to kind of talk through some of what I have here, hopefully be of service to some of you who are maybe new or someone that finds this later. Hi, how are you? We're filming this around Christmas time, so I've got some green and red lights kind of going. I hope they look good. So, happy holidays to anybody that's happening to watch this during that time, and to everyone else. Hope you're having a good week, whatever the case is. Oh, and really quick, before we jump into it, in case you haven't seen me out and about, which I don't know why you would have, but I'm wearing these super fancy, phenomenal glasses. So today's episode is unofficially sponsored. I traditionally have had really great vision my whole life, and all of a sudden, I think by some of the, kind of working on some of this coding stuff, but just age and screens and just all the other stuff, I've gotten to the point where I was going a couple of weeks with headaches and trouble sleeping and just kind of all of that kind of stuff. And so as I was getting into the coding, it was getting worse and worse. So these are actually by the company Felix Gray. Not sure if you're familiar with Felix Gray, not even sure if you can read that. They're phenomenal glasses. They're basically just their technology glasses. They've got no real other feature to them. They just help with kind of blocking some of that light that comes off the laptops and the devices and things like that you might encounter. I've enjoyed using them for about the past week. They've worked really, really well for what I bought them for. I've been using them pretty extensively, and I really enjoy them. So let's jump in. All right, so here's the project they had us working on. So essentially what we were given was a list of students, as it were, and they asked us to create this pagination from the list to allow for easier kind of user interface on viewing everybody, because the starting version of this list looked a little something like this. So it looked like this. It was just a giant, list of students, as it were. And though this obviously it is, not problematic in a general sense, it does create some issues when it comes to usability. So the actual thing they wanted us to do, which is part of the issue that I had when it came to creating and finishing this project, was they didn't necessarily want us to add HTML elements to the index.html page, like buttons and things like this. They wanted us to add these dynamically using JavaScript. That way, if someone had, say, JavaScript disabled on their browser, they could still see the full list. They wouldn't get the functionality and the user interface of, say, a search button or pagination or anything like that, but they would still get the content that they were after. And I believe this is called something, it's called unobtrusive unobtrusive coding, unobtrusive JavaScript. Anyway, essentially what you have is you have this idea that you can still serve a client that might be on an older browser or a browser that doesn't particularly allow for, say, newer features of code that you might be working with. They still get what they are after, but they might not necessarily see all the benefits that maybe someone on a newer browser or a browser that's more compatible might get. So if you're looking over at we'll jump into VS Code here. So if you're looking at the actual HTML file, it's just that list. It's just a list of all of the individuals that that you see over there on the web page. And over here is where they wanted us to dynamically add the pagination. And then up here, if this was part of that extra credit portion, dynamically inserting a search form. And obviously it says optional here. So that's where they wanted these items to be created. And what that required was essentially traversing the DOM and manipulating the DOM in such a way that you created those items dynamically to produce that unobtrusive style of coding, that unobtrusive style of development, right? So what we have here at the top, for those that don't know or maybe are really new and kind of getting into this first line here, this document.addEventListener DOM content loaded. Essentially what this is here is it's not necessary for this project, both because of the scope, the scale, and just everything working with it. But essentially, as I understand it, what this does is that it waits for the entire page to load before activating any of the, say, JavaScript that we've now put onto this this website, right? So we've got the comment here that just saying this will wait to execute the JavaScript until the page content completely loads. Again, just kind of creating that unobtrusive situation, increases the speed with which the website loads and things like that. Generally speaking, kind of a best practice scenario that you have here. Another thing that we have kind of sitting here at the top is we have some global variables that are set aside. These allow you to reference, manipulate, and traverse the DOM. So these are global variables, and as it would entail, as it kind of sounds, it's constant. It's this constant idea that throughout the global being the scope of this project. There are different scopes within your code. You've got the local scope. That would be something happening inside of a function here. And then you have the more global scope. Everywhere that you see students, and if you don't use VS Code, you can kind of see these little tick marks over here off to the side, and we can go find students. So student appears here, students appears here, students appears here. Everywhere that exists, that variable equals this document.query selector all dot student items, right? So it's got this, this class of student items. So if we go back to the index here, we can see this class of student items, student-items. So it's basically just saying that anywhere you see students, that is controlled using, that's what this equals, that's what that is. And so we've got a couple of variables listed out here that are used throughout this entire project. We've got students, student details, which covers the student details class back on our list over here. We've got a const of page div, which is this class of page. Page header, and then when it came to creating those pagination buttons, as it were, and they're not truly buttons, but those buttons, we wanted to have 10 students a page. So we have this variable of const being students per page being equaling 10, the number 10. That's the quantity with which that will equal. And then we have a let variable here. The let variable is a little different in terms of const, as I understand it, to be that, const is this constant. Let is something that if you have a variable that is or can change in terms of values. So I always want 10 students per page, but the page number amount might change because I've got 45 students this year and 50 students next year or something like that. It will always be a number, but it might not always be a particular number, if that makes any sense. And so we've got this let variable here. We've got some more kind of global variables for our search button, which was, I'll show you how that works and what that entailed. It was not, and this was part of like that exceeds expectations portion of the scope. Then we have a let variable here on results, because results potentially can change. And what we have that listed out here is as an array. And then we have the let variable on an error. So that's if we find a scenario where we're searching for a student and no students exist, under that title. We've got an image here that I added. We'll take a look at that here in a minute. This was not part of the project at all. This was just something fun I wanted to add. And then we have, so this is where we add the actual search button and field to the page. This is our dynamically adding the search button to the page. This is appending it. So what we have here is we have that search div, which we created right up here. And it's got a class name of student search. And then we have search.input, and we have a placeholder, which will be search for students. And then we have a button that'll say search on it. This is the text content. And I'll go into more detail on a lot of this as I get a lot more comfortable explaining this to you guys. I'm obviously going very, very quickly here. I just want you to get an idea of what it looks like on the back end of a project like this. And so we have the page header, which is part of that global scope we talked about before. And if we come over here to page header, here's our page header. So what we're essentially saying here is, under the page header, I want to append the child. So it'll be under. You've got your parent, child, and sibling. It's kind of how it denotes throughout JavaScript here. But so under the page header, I want to append the child search div, right? So we've got search div here. And in the search div, I want to append the child search input, which is this piece right here. And under the search div, I want to append the child search button. And I want them to be in this order of the search field and the search button. And then we have a couple of other items here, error.className error, which I'll show you what that does here in a second, and error.textContent is just an open, it's an empty string here. Then we've got the page div append child error. So what this one does is it essentially says, if we have an error, I want you to append, I want you to add this child, this element of error under page div, which is the kind of the entire page, as it were. So if we go back to index, we've got page header, which is where I want that button to sit under. So we're back here now. So now we've got the next big thing that we have to do is we have to create that show page function. This is what we will use to create the 10 students per page. So we have a function here of const show page. And what essentially it's saying is you have, and there's a for loop situation happening here. But what you wanted to, the purpose of this here, this first student, last student, will be a reference at the beginning and the ending of the new pages. Essentially what we have going on here is we have a situation that we wanted to create where if you added, say, so we've got 64 students. So actually, let me just take this 64 students and let me add it to this page. So we're currently at however many, this was like 54 or something like that. So now we're at 64. So let's just make sure this works. Let's see. So we've got our 64 here, a whole bunch of people. And this will create more, let's copy all of our script here into our scripts.js file here to give you an idea of what we're looking at. So you can see when we have 64 students added, it creates the appropriate number of pages. So basically what we're saying is it takes the total number of students and it segments that out. So 64 is going to be 6 pages of 10 and then 1 page of 4. So let's see if that proofs out. So we've got 1 page, 2 page, 3 page, 4 page, 5 pages, 6 pages of 10, and then a page of 4, essentially. So that's what this math is doing. That's what this loop is kind of running through and doing. It's just saying, okay, so we've got 64. So we've got 10, 1, 10, 2, 10, 3, 10, 4, 10, 5, 10, 6. Oh, we don't have 10, but we still need to create the page, and we've got 4, essentially. So it's just creating another page for every tens of students that have been added here. That's essentially what's happening here. And now we have the function for the actual appending of the page links. And so now we have the function that actually creates those page links at the bottom. So they look kind of like buttons, but they're actually just links at the bottom of that page. So if you come back over here, we go all the way to the bottom, and we have the dynamically add pagination links. That's what this right here, that's what this append page links is doing. So again, we have a similar situation. We've got another const, saying append page links equals, and this is a function where you're going through, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to remove the pagination if nothing exists. Why does that matter? Well, if nothing exists there, when would that happen? Well, that might happen if we're using that search function like we were talking about before, and we use this search to find a student whose name doesn't exist in the list. Well, then we want to remove that pagination because there shouldn't be any on the page. So essentially, that's what we're doing with this particular first component. If there's nothing on the page, nothing exists, there's no list of anything here, I want to remove everything from the div. And then we've got a find total number of pages needed. So we've got a let variable on total pages needed, and then we have a math.ceil, so ceiling. We have list.length, which is we've already created, like that list of how many there are, and then students per page divided out, right? So we've got list.length, and then this creates like the appropriate number of pages. And then we've got a create and append page links. So this creates the pagination, and it appends it. It adds it to the page itself. In doing so, it creates an unordered list. And within that unordered list, we have the actual list items that are listed out as a link as a number, right? So we go back over here, we have our numbers. So this creates this div here, and then we have our unordered list. And within that unordered list, we have our actual list items of the numbers that have now been divided out from the number of students. Trust me, I'll get way better at explaining all of this. I'm new to this, so don't judge me too harshly. Then we have a create active list. So this is another thing that they wanted us to do. They wanted us to denote whatever page is currently selected from your pagination needs to be the active link, right? So if we actually load up the developer tools here, and we go in here and we inspect, say, number 1. So let's inspect 1 here. You can see that we've added the active class to this list item 1, right? Which is great. Now if we click on 6, so now we're on page 6, and let's inspect 6. So now we've added the active class to page 6. So this is a requirement they asked, how would you do that? What would you do to make this work? This is how we do that. Create that active list on the clicked page. And then we have an event listener. This is essentially, it's listening for a click, and the event is the target, and it's the number, essentially, of the show page, which is that list we created before. And this is what creates the functionality behind us being able to click here and actually, move throughout the list. So that's what this is doing. And then we have, create that search function. So now this is the search function itself. So we have that results back here. This is an array. So what happens is whenever someone searches out, so we can go back here, it creates a certain number. So let's do AM. So AM is in student name or something. Oh, well, we've got a lot of AMs, so let's do like DE. Perfect. So this is an array. These are all the students that have DE in some variant within their name, their email address, something like that. And that's what shows up here. We only have one page of that, and it creates this array, this list of all the students that match that criteria. So that's what we're creating here. So we're appending the students' result array that match, and then we're hiding those that do not match. One important thing to note here, that was something that I kind of was a last minute addition that was a really good idea, was this to lowercase functionality here. And what that allowed us to do is that if someone types in all capitals here or lowercase here, what that allows us to do is if someone comes in here and let's say they've got their caps lock on, it'll still work. If they go here, it'll still work. Essentially, it takes whatever the input is, and if the text content, it transitions it, it transforms it into a lowercase. So that way, regardless of how they enter in the text, it will obviously yield the exact same results. So that was something I did not originally have. And so when I came in here and let's say I did this, it gave me no results at all because I did not have that to lowercase functionality in there, which is really, really important. Then we have the display message if no students are found. So this goes back all the way to the error that we created up above, and then it appends this error to the page whenever this is fired off, if this function here is fired off. So display, so we have this error text. It says thank you for searching, right? All good. And then it appends this image that we denoted up top. One of the important things here is that if you are typing out a name and all of a sudden it doesn't, there's no student with that, it'll say thank you for searching, but your student is in another castle, which is great. But if you back out and you leave the search field blank again, and you have this empty string, it'll turn that text content into nothing. It'll be, the text content becomes an empty string again. Feel free to leave me all the comments in the world on everything I'm saying being wrong, but either way, fairly certain that's what that does. Then we have the append pagination to the search results. So this is very simple. This just essentially just says, take your results, however many that number is, create that many numbers in terms of the page number. So if let's say we do A, we've only got the one. So let's say we do SP, nope, SI, goodness. I was hoping to have less than, some variant of pages that weren't, oh, there you go. Okay, so just S alone will give us 3 pages. So you can see we can also create the pagination for just the search results as well. And then we have an event listener here. I'm fairly certain that something that a lot of people, if you're really well versed in JavaScript or coding, would have noticed by now is that some of this stuff could have been done a lot easier with things like jQuery, or not having to create some of these features dynamically and instead just creating a button and then calling on that button to do the things you wanted it to do. Again, the point of this one was to create that unobtrusive look and feel to be able to have and service, say, multiple browsers or whatever the case may be, right? Same thing here. So again, just recently, because I've already started on section 3, I could already figure out, I believe it's by using the on feature within jQuery to essentially take both of these event listeners, and it might even be possible in JavaScript, I just don't know how yet, but and basically place them in the same line. And you want to have enough to be to have everything work and be correct, but you don't want it to be bloated, essentially. And so that's the idea here. I think there's actually a joke regarding the optimist sees the glass as half full, the pessimist sees the glass as half empty, and the engineer wonders why the glass is twice as big as it needs to be. So essentially, that's the joke, right? So it's essentially what we have here. And what we have here is we have an event listener that says, if on the search input, which is our search field here, something happens, listen for input. When you get that input on a key up, if a keystroke enters into that field, start working, start searching through the results, finding the students, and then implementing the student details within that spot. And then we have another event listener on click. And then we close everything off here all the way from the top from our document.add event listener on the DOM content loaded. So that is essentially all of the code behind the project 2 in the Treehouse. And this was really difficult for me to get done. I was searching for dynamically add search field to an HTML page, dynamically add, and everybody just kept pointing towards jQuery, which specifically within the rules for this particular project, they said don't use jQuery, because they really start to dive into jQuery in project 3, which is something I did not know at the time, but everyone was pointing towards solutions in jQuery, which wasn't the option there. So that was really interesting, trying to solve that in a way that, potentially might not be a way that you solve it all the time, because obviously if you've got access to being able to use jQuery or something like that, potentially you would need to do it this way. But it really helped me grow. It really helped me learn a lot of things by doing it that way, if that makes any sense. Like I said, I'm sure a lot of what I said was completely wrong and inaccurate, and on all of those fronts, definitely, leave a very angry, mean comment down below and let me know what I need to improve on. But what I don't have down a lot of yet is the phrasing, the lingo. But I'll get it, and when I do, watch out. And talking about it out loud really helps me understand where I need to get better and where I need to grow on, like I said, on the lingo and stuff like that. But it worked, and it provided a really great opportunity to really grow and stretch within what I'm trying to learn in coding. So I hope this is helpful for you, and thank you so much. It was hopefully not too long-winded, and I really appreciate you being here. And since it is right before the holiday season here in 2018, happy holidays to everybody, and I hope everybody's out there staying safe. Cheers. That was tough. Man, I really got to get that lingo down.